Okay, thanks everyone so much for coming and nice to see all these connections being made here this morning. I'm going to have Dr. Ketty Zhao give the introduction for this presentation today. This is part of his research team, and you are correct. We are delighted to have Ketty on faculty here at the University of Regina. And, and it's such a pleasure to work with him, and so wonderful also to make these connections through all of Ketty's research endeavors and the fantastic work that he's doing. So we feel very lucky to have you come today to our Social Work Research Center's Lunch and Learn and present what you've been working on. To everyone who's joined us today, thank you so much for coming. I think this is probably going to be our last Lunch and Learn of the academic year, but we'll get started up again in September. So we appreciate you making the time and joining us for your lunch and learning. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Zhao. I will say that I think most of you, I've enabled I don't know why it was disabling your mics and your cameras, but it looks like everybody's good to go now. And I know that there should be time at the end for questions and discussion. So stay tuned for that. If you have any issues with your audio or video at that point, just let me know and I'll see what I can do on this end. I'll turn it over to you, Ketty. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Kara. First of all, I want to thank Kara and Sue for organizing this, for inviting us to be part of this event. And I would definitely like to introduce our presenters today. So Yahan, who is a PhD student in social work, University of Toronto, and Dr. Madeleine Mant is a professor from Department of Anthropology at University of Toronto, and Dr. Izumi Sakamoto, who is my mentor during my PhD studies, is an associate professor from Faculty of Social Work, University of Toronto as well. And it's my honor to invite them to share the wonderful work they have been doing about anti-Asian racism. And it's really nice to have this opportunity to talk with everybody here regarding this fantastic topic. So I'm going to open the floor to our guest presenters. But first of all, I would like to do the land acknowledgement here from Regina. So the University of Regina is situated on Treaty 4 lands with a presence in Treaty 6. These are the territories of Nayawak, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis and Michif Nation. Today, these lands continue to be the shared territory of many diverse peoples from near and far. So it's our honor to have these long-term learn events on the territories on the Treaties 4 and 6, and they really reflect upon racism and then try to build solidarities with everybody on this land. So without further ado, I'm gonna pass to the team here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. I'll also do a land acknowledgement as I'm calling from the University of Toronto. I want to begin by acknowledging that university sits on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. We want to acknowledge that the colonial roots that displaced Indigenous people continue to harm Indigenous, Black, Asian, and many other racialized communities. And we want to recognize that whose land we are on is part of recognizing whose harms get seen so that we can start to act differently. And I will pass on to Izumi to talk about our project.
Thank you, Yahan. I'm Izumi Sakamoto from University of Toronto. So this is part of the celebration of Asian Heritage Month, month of May, and we are honoring Asian Canadians and stories that built Canada. So I want to put that in a little bit of a context. So, and we're going to talk about structural oppression that is within Canada that shows up as anti-Asian racism later. And this research that we are about to present was funded by multiple sources, first of which is the University of Toronto COVID-19 Action Fund grant to Madeleine Mant. Very foresightful. In 2020, she jumped up and applied for this action grant in 2020 in the spring, summer. And that enabled her and her colleagues to collect survey and qualitative data, and which was then followed up with SWRC institutional grant to myself to be able to work with students to, at that time, Katie and then later Yahan with Factor-Inwentash Faculty of Social Work Doctoral Research Fellowship. It's been a wonderful journey to do this work together. Lim Fan is my colleague at Factor-Inwentash Faculty of Social Work at University of Toronto, who was too busy to join us today, but she's a very important part of the team as well. Next slide, please. So Kara has seen this already, but I would like to talk about what we mean by anti-Asian racism. Anti-Asian racism became more pronounced or visible during COVID-19 pandemic from 2020. However, it always existed within the Canadian society. As this picture illustrates, white immigrants were promoted or welcomed, whereas immigrants from Asia, namely China, Japan, and India in early years, had quotas or exclusive acts that would prohibit them from freely immigrate to Canada. The restriction of people of color immigrating to Canada lasted until 1967. Next slide, please. And there are many acts of racism, a notable one being 1907. There was an Asiatic Exclusion League that was formed, and there was what is termed as White Riot by Henry Tang at Emily Carr University of the attacks of Chinatown and Japanese area called Paueruga in Vancouver's downtown east side. East Indians, so-called Indian folks, were also attacked around that time as well. And these are the pictures of Powell Street after September 7th, 1907 attacks. Next slide, please. In fact, there are many important events, unfortunate events that happened in the past 150 years. Chinese head tax, Chinese immigrants were imposed on head tax for each person immigrating to Canada. That lasted for 40 years, nearly 40 years, an apology of which only happened so many years later. Continuous journey regulation, Komagata Maru affected South Asian immigrants, stopped at the port of Vancouver in the case of Komagata Maru, turned back sick immigrants. And Asian Canadians banned from hospitals during Spanish flu, and there was Chinese Exclusion Act that was in place for 20-some years. And then Japanese internment or incarceration shortly after bombing of Pearl Harbor by Japanese Imperial military. Just because I study in this area, this is about Japanese Canadian mass incarceration during World War II. About more than 22,000 Japanese Canadians were uprooted from their homes along the West Coast and relocated to incarceration camps in the BC interior and across Canada. POW campus is even in Ontario. Working age men were separated and sent to road camps. And the majority were born in Canada, second generation as well, to note. And there were not only incarceration, but also disposition of their properties and subsequent disposal because BC refused to have them back to British Columbia until 1949. So some call it cultural genocide. Next slide, please. Fast forward, Asian Canadians seem to be doing really well in the society. There are elected officials, there are industry leaders. We also had the Governor General. And so this model minority is a term that is often used to talk about Asians' success, but it's important to note that this term model minority was coined in 1970s by a sociologist in the US, specifically to divide and control communities of color, especially African Americans and Latinos that were sort of uprising or organizing themselves, civil rights movements. On one hand, it hails the accomplishments of Asian Americans, while on the other hand, pushing it down to make sure it's forever minority. So this is the idea of model minority, and which the term was then traveled to Canada, and not only applied to original target groups like East Asian Americans, but also to South Asians, Southeast Asians, and so forth. Model minority myth has always been used against other people's color, especially Black people. And as a model minority, anti-Asian racism is made invisible and dismissed at the same time as well. Next slide, please. Fast forward, COVID-19 pandemic happened, and that's still new to our memory. And a year into the pandemic, this shocking incident happened, Atlanta mass shooting. 8 people were killed at 3 different locations, 3 different massage parlors in Atlanta. Single shooter, white man, committed this mass shooting. And out of 8, 6 of them were Asian women. Next slide, please. It was shocking also that the killer's act seemed to have been justified because he had sexual addiction by the police chief's announcement. And that was really awful and enraged many people, as it should. So this part, Minha Pham talks about this as the Atlanta shooter didn't have a sexual addiction. He had racist, sexualized fantasies about dominating Asian women. In other words, he had fantasies of white supremacy and acted on them, name it. Because if you say sexual addiction that led to mass shooting, it would individualize the issue, and somehow it justifies the shooting, which is the killing, murder of other people of color. And that's so wrong. Race, sex, and death from Miss Saigon to Atlanta. So there's also a connection of persistent stereotype of Asian women as exotic, less than white men, and to be consumed and to be in the service for white men's fantasy. Therefore, when they do not serve to the fantasy, then they are allowed to be killed. So that's a wrong perception, but that somehow that is perpetuated in the dominant society. Next one, please. In fact, white supremacy is held up by many forms of structural oppressions. So it's anti-Asian racism is one form of oppression, and colonialism, genocide, capitalism, slavery, war, anti-Islamism, Islamism, or Islamophobia, or ethnic cleansing, anti-Semitism, sexism, patriarchy, and homophobia, transphobia, many other forms of violence and oppressions are supporting the dominant hegemonic power, which is then white supremacy. You don't have to be white to hold up this white supremacy if you're buying into any of the structural oppressions that are in place. Next slide, please. And I'll pass on to Maddie, please.
Thank you so much. So hi, everybody. I'm Maddie Mant, joining you from University of Toronto, Mississauga. So the early pandemic period brought sudden attention to Asian communities around the world, and this moment of visibility was extremely complex. So suddenly this long history of anti-Asian racism that Izumi was just describing was suddenly worldwide news. People were quite literally saying the quiet part out loud, and we saw mainstream media reporting incidents of harassment and physical violence perpetrated against Asian individuals. So how do we move from the model minority myth to asking questions that are relevant to this in this specific moment? So in this particular piece of work, we asked our research questions here. First, how aware are students of anti-Asian racism? And does their level of awareness vary depending upon who they are? And then second, does this awareness of anti-Asian racism shift over time? And finally, does it actually become action? So essentially, did this moment of extreme attention yield any change? Who was aware already? Who became aware? And was this awareness then maintained or turned into something new? So next slide, please. This collaboration is an expansion and extension of a project I was working on with a group of colleagues regarding health behaviors and pandemic perceptions among young adults. So we're working from a biocultural and biomedical background, discussing how young adults have different understandings of risk than older adults. And in addition, young adults are starting to make decisions for themselves for the first time. So this period of transition is really important to understand for health interventions. So we know that longitudinal mixed methods research is really necessary to understand changing dynamics and perceptions. So during the first 2 years of the COVID pandemic, we used a mixed methods approach to survey and interview young adults attending a large Canadian public university, aka U of T. You got to research your own if they're available. And thanks to the swiftness of our University Research Ethics Board, we were able to prepare this ethics application in February 2020 as it became much more clear that the pandemic was going to become a pandemic. And it meant that our survey actually opened 3 days after the province of Ontario went into its first lockdown and just 4 days after the University of Toronto shut down classes. So as a result, this survey captured the earliest data of its kind in Canada, and the team has published various articles on things like health behaviors, intended and actual vaccine uptake, as well as media consumption. So just to give you a sense of the scale, we ultimately undertook 6 rounds of surveys and associated interviews. So individuals who filled out a survey could share their email address if they were potentially interested in being part of an interview. And we were working to seek gender parity in the interview samples. And we just interviewed until theme saturation was achieved. Then at each subsequent round of survey or interview, we reached out to everybody who had participated previously to ask if they'd like to participate again. Now, we were not attempting to directly track folks for each survey, but we did track folks between the interviews. So some people were interviewed all 6 times. In other cases, we interviewed folks once or twice. So we have a total of 58 unique individuals, but over 120 interviews. All survey participants could enter a draw for, sorry, Yahan, I want to go back to the last slide. Thank you. Could enter a draw for a gift card, and everybody who was interviewed was given a gift card. So I wanted to just show you the questions here to kind of center us before we move on. When we started our first round of interviews on April 2nd of 2020, we asked this question: are you aware of any racist incidents towards the Asian Canadian and or Chinese communities linked to the COVID-19 pandemic? And then in round 2 of the survey, we added the question here. So participants could say in the survey yes or no, and then we're able to expand upon what they may have seen or heard or read or experienced. So I hope it's clear from our originals work, the original project had a different focus. We were thinking about health behaviors and general perceptions. But my colleagues and I were really quickly moved to collect these data. It felt immediately that there was a moral necessity to ask these questions and to get this into the survey as well. But I knew even as we were collecting it that we were going to need to expand the research team and reach out to the experts to be able to properly analyze and contextualize these data. And then magically, the U of T News showed me an article about Dr. Lin Fang and Dr. Izumi Sakamoto's work, starting to do some focus group work on some of these very similar questions a little bit later. And so truly, I just emailed them and said, would you like to work together? And the rest is history. And so we found this really organic collaboration, getting to work with these data in, I hope, the proper way. So Yahan, next slide, please. This is just to give you folks a sense of the timeline here. So we had 3 rounds of the interviews and surveys in 2020 itself, then again in the spring and fall of 2021, and then finally 2 years later from the beginning of the outbreak of the announcement of it being a pandemic in spring of 2022. So varied levels of participation for each, but overall we had 4,932 survey responses and these over 120 interviews. So Yahan, next slide, please. And we'd be very delighted to get really granular if you want to take a look at the demographics of each version, but just to give you a general sense, the majority of participants, so between 72 and 80% at each round, identified as female. We were asked folks to self-describe their gender. The mean age of participants overall was 21 years old. We also asked individuals, really importantly, to self-describe their ethnicity. And then we went through to categorize responses, first of all, into the 16 groups according to Statistics Canada standards. We ended up with some small cell sizes in various categories. So we eventually consolidated ethnicity into these more aggregated groupings to ensure adequate statistical power. And we found that white participants, South Asian participants, and those in the category we called Chinese/Hong Kongers/Taiwanese were the most populous groupings. Most folks were living in the Greater Toronto area. We also asked for questions around things like household income, and about half was below $75,000 for overall household income and about half above. And we tested all these demographic variables for their potential relationship to awareness of anti-Asian racism. And then we're able to use these really rich interview data sets to understand the quantitative results and what we were seeing through these multiple rounds of coding and triangulation and lots of discussion. So Yahan, next slide, please. And I'm going to hand off to Yahan in just a moment, but just to show you, in general, the awareness of anti-Asian racism was high. In every single round, at least 3/4 of the survey participants said they were aware. But when we zoomed in, we did really find these nuanced changes over time. So in the figure, you can see we've marked where the surveys are happening, where various events are happening surrounding the university. But some of the key events mentioned by interviewee participants are also shown here. And you can see that the levels of awareness are rising and falling alongside key events, with the most intense rise being associated with the Atlanta spa shootings, as Izumi just detailed. This event occurred less than a week before we opened that spring 2021 survey, and the event was mentioned multiple times explicitly in the interviews as well. So I want to hand the mic over now to Yahan, who's going to guide you through our key findings of the project.
Thank you, Maddie. Yeah, as Maddie mentioned, we have a quant and qualitative part. So exactly like how quant show us the what question, what shape of awareness and who held them, the qualitative analysis actually gives us the answer of what the mechanism behind their awareness. And I will talk about three main findings. The first will be the timeline of the triggers. The second will be the relation between exposure and awareness. And third will be the qualitative analysis on why this awareness is episodic instead of sustained, and does it translate to action or not. And I will talk about the first one. So the first finding is the timeline of the triggers. There are three key social events related to our awareness. First is the Chinese virus rhetoric, kind of pushed by Trump in March 2020, which had a very massive and persistent impact in our data. The Chinese virus rhetoric actually is the most prominent one. We had the most themes and coded references with this code. And this, as one of the West Indian participants said, when Donald Trump started this whole crap about a Chinese virus, people decided, oh, maybe if he said it, I could say it too. So it's kind of normalized the racist language around anti-Asian racism. And the second one will be the Black Lives Matter movement. Actually, in the July of 2020, we had this Chinese participant observe that seeing Black Lives Matter actually empower people to stand up and shout, "Stop Asian Hate," when Atlanta shooting happened. It kind of provided a scaffolding or a structure for people to understand racism and to actually act on that. And then the March 2021, as Maddie and Izumi mentioned, the Atlanta shooting actually skyrocketed the discussion of AR, and people feel more okay to actually talk about their own traumatic incidents of AR when it happened. And then another thing is that because our sample is mostly students in U of T, so the campus closure and the reopening actually is a structural driver of their awareness offline and online. The campus closed in March 2020, and the gender variant white student actually recall receiving an email from the university addressing the AR that happened in the campus. And this, for us, signals that within only 3 months, people started to get the situations getting very, very bad. And when the school moved online, so does the hostilities. And in this account, the white female student noted that she hadn't seen racism personally in his physical community, but saw it brought up consistently in videos, on Instagram, on Snapchat and Facebook. And then when the school reopened in 2021, we had the hostility return to the physical space. The student from UAE said that they don't tell other people to mask up, but they tell me to mask up. And then we want to talk about our finding 2, which is the 2 key variables related to the awareness. First, the ethnicity and the gender. So we find that ethnicity is actually creating a concentric circle. Who are most impacted are more aware, and the people who observed or witnessed AR in their lives are less aware. And we find that Chinese students from our qualitative studies are 2 times more likely to be aware of AR compared to white peers, especially in round 3, 4, and 6, and followed by non-Chinese Asian, BIPOC, and white students. And across all of the rounds, we find that female students are more aware of AR. In the round 3, they actually had the 2.5 times more odds of awareness compared to their male counterparts. And why is that? So we want to discuss the proximity to harm and how it shapes the awareness. We find a lot of Chinese and Asian students actually got the awareness they are through embodied experiences. So they got pushed, avoided verbal harassment, microaggression in their daily life. That kind of gave them an embodied knowledge of what is happening in the world and why AR is happening. And a lot of them who are still in the Asian community but hasn't survived suffered from that themselves actually heard it from their family and friends, which generated a general fear that, oh, it might happen to me. For example, this Filipino participant said that, I think I'm very obviously Asian, so I'm scared of myself, for myself. And then for the BIPOC and white participant, they are aware because their everyday exposure to AR. For example, this Black female participant said that they recognizing the willfully ignorant and people who want to just stuck in the ways they think about things. And this is a similar pattern that they're recognized as anti-Black racism, also anti-Asian racism with the same structure. But we find that recognition reached every group. As Maddie mentioned earlier, we had the awareness, all of the rounds there actually above 75%. But it was different when people feel it in their body or when they observe it or recognizing in their minds. And then another thing is that we find gender actually predict the awareness in every round. The first reason is that they're more targeted. Of the 20 specific incidents the participant reported, actually 12 of them were experienced by women and 4 by the gender variant participant. And at the same time, for the non-Asian groups, actually women are more frequently noticed and gender variant participants are more frequently noticed and had emotional impacts on AR. They will say like, I'm angry, I feel fearful, I'm sad, or I feel this is like not annoying and disgust. And in this account, a gender variant East-West South Asian talk about an incident that happened on a bus. So she noticed that they are kind of targeting Asian presenting women, and it was very terrifying for them. The third finding will be the heart of our study, which is we find that awareness is actually episodic, is not sustained, and there is a gap between knowing and doing. A lot of our participants actually kind of noted a discursive disappearance, like there has been less discussion, it died out pretty quickly, it dropped, but then they feel like maybe this is not the actual change. Like AR still exists, but people just not talk about it because news cycle don't talk about AR that much. And even for this white female participant who have been interviewed from the round 1 to 6, she was aware of AR. But then when we're asked in the round 6, she said, I cannot name any incidents of the top of my head right now. And then we want to talk about awareness might not actually lead to actions. We have two examples here. First is from the white male participant who was very aware of AR. He was actually interviewed in round 2 and 5, and he shared that I'm very aware of AR and I'm against the Chinese virus rhetoric. But when his roommate talked about the Chinese virus, he froze and he said, if this was on the street, I'd say stop doing that. But it's very hard when there's someone that you have to deal with that every day. At the same time, the South Asian student who has the East Asian friend who got told to go back to your country, she actually was interviewed twice, and she expressed her anger and her like emotions when she was interviewed the first time. And in this round, she actually fought back. She said to the racist that you should go back to your country. Whose land you think you're on? So the frustration actually became fuel, and she said, I was so proud of myself. So we think that awareness is necessary, but it's not enough. People leave in context their relational cost, ambiguous setting, missing script when we are in the spa. We don't know what to say. So I want to pass on to Izumi to talk about what exactly can we do.
Thank you, Yahan. So we have lots of rich information from the data, so we can't cover everything, and we are still writing the manuscript right now. But in order to close the gap from individual recognition to collective response, there are 4 things we have here. So one, name it in the curriculum, in the school curriculum, K-12, as well as in university and graduate school level. Students were making sense of anti-Asian racism alone often, and institutions can discuss anti-Asian racism explicitly in classes rather than leaving it to private interpretation. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, classes moved to online, and so few classes talked about anti-Asian racism, and that's something we can change. Lead with solidarity. Non-Asian BIPOC understood anti-Asian racism through their own racialization, so they could relate from their own experience. White participants rejected the rhetoric of, for example, Kung Flu or China virus. The base for cross-group solidarity is already in the data. So expand on that, push from that to action, build bystander scripts. Most encounters happen in mundane, ambiguous settings like aisles, classrooms, transit, stores, where intervention scripts are least developed. Train for exactly these. So think about when this happens, then what can I do? What can I say? If it's too scary to say something, maybe you can mobilize, maybe you can pull up your cell phone. So think about what kinds of actions that you can take when things are unfolding in front of you. And bystander training have become widely popular during the pandemic as well. So those resources are available. And sustain attention, episodic awareness fades with the news cycle. So durable structures, not one-off campaigns, are what convert recognition into sustained practice. Oh, is it still going on? Maybe the sense that people have, but as mentioned earlier, anti-Asian racism always existed. So as anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism. So sustain attention and think that even if it falls off the news cycle, it must be going on, and you could do something about it. Next slide, please. So as I said earlier, anti-Asian racism is one piece of a larger system of oppression. So it's very important to recognize each unique aspect. For example, anti-Black racism has unique history and manifestations. So as anti-Indigenous racism, all of which became much more visible and recognizable during the pandemic with George Floyd in 2020 May, 215 unnamed graves found in Kamloops in 2021 May also. So these are threshold events, so to speak, that made the particular forms of racism more visible or recognizable. But it's very important that you don't just anti-Asian racism, talking about just anti-Asian racism, but just seeing in that in a larger system of oppression, especially recognizing that Black Lives Matter helped make anti-Asian racism nameable. So we owe to the activist committee in African Americans and Black folks to do that. Similar structure of stigma, naming a virus after people echoes a long history of scapegoating, like Spanish flu. So we don't call American flu, but it was a Spanish flu, and the China virus. It's just by using that kind of name, you are stigmatizing a group of people. So just be aware of the structure of stigma. Stand together in solidarity. Fight against anti-Asian racism and other types of racism together by naming racism, recognizing its impacts and acts. So for that, I would like to invite ourselves, all of us, to keep on learning about how racism and different forms of oppression show up in our daily lives, not just for you, but people around you, and make more, just keep on educating yourself and unlearn what you might have learned already in the past as oppressive structure. So that leads us to questions and answer. And we are open to answering any questions you might have. And open the floor. And so these are contact information of all of us who are involved in this project. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Yahan, Izumi, and Madeleine. Wonderful presentation. I'm also very honored to be part of this. Any questions from our audience? Comments, thoughts, questions? Well, if not, I can start. I have one question, as always. So my question is, because this project is excellent. It's based on University of Toronto. We have a large student population, also a diverse student population. But I'm thinking about, for example, like smaller size university where we don't have many, for example, students from Asian background. And if we are doing the similar studies, how we should, kind of like raise the awareness of addressing anti-Asian racism, how we should, talk to students about those issues here. I would love to hear your opinions on this.
Yahan, would you like to go first and we can follow up, or I can also answer? What do you think?
Yahan, you're muted.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I was part of the Asian parents project who are we interview a lot of parents from all over Canada, and we find a lot of parents from rural or non-GTA areas. They actually share similar things. They said that even Asian Heritage Month is something they have to push forward so that people will be aware, oh, there is a month for Asian people. So I think the first step maybe is to recognize and let people know that, yeah, we exist. Asian people exist in all of these spaces, and we have our cultures, we have our joy, we have our art, we have also the traumatic experiences of racism that we want to talk about with the people in the community and also with the people outside of our community. Yeah, pass on to Izumi.
Yeah, so I think people are now equipped with social media or using internet to connect with each other. So if people are isolated, I think there are multiple ways to connect with each other. So that is one answer I have. But when you are feeling isolated, from that state to connecting to other people, there's a gap, especially when you feel that you don't deserve to raise a voice, that maybe this is not racism, maybe this is not big deal, maybe it's okay. So those whispers inside of you might hold you back from voicing your concerns or experiences of racism, especially when people around you may not understand what that is. And model minority myth also works against that as well. So it's not that bad, it's like you're not Black, you're Asian, you're doing well, and you don't in terms of getting targeted for racism. So that may be what other people might tell you, because their anti-Black racism is more pronounced in the society, or anti-Indigenous racism, but that doesn't having awareness for those different forms of racism is, again, important, but that doesn't erase the fact that anti-Asian racism does exist. So higher education institutions have the role to play in raising awareness, maybe create dialogues, seminars, educational resources, student leaders, the work of student leaders be elevated in the media from the university, the faculty of social work, school of social work. So I think there are many ways to raise awareness on anti-Asian racism and normalize the fact that anti-Asian racism does exist and it's a bad thing, and you can raise concerns, and you can raise voice, and also create a mechanism to address that within the institution. So that's what I would say about Maddie.
Yeah, and I was taking a couple of notes as you were speaking. Kitty, it's such an interesting question. Of course, you're asking us, even though I'm like, you know the answer and you know where you want to kind of go with this. But I appreciate you putting us on the spot to think about it, because when we were first sort of undertaking this survey and pulling these data, I did wonder about, representativeness and, sort of just those overall big questions. But that getting these data at this time, it felt like whatever we can get is something is really important. But that point, when I was just going over the demographics really briefly about those in the GTA and those not, there were lots of people that said, I'm actually not originally from the GTA, like I'm a student at U of T now, but I'm from, small town Manitoba, or I'm from here and from there. So we did get some of that, like some of the sort of experiences of people that are not, coming from that kind of urban background. But what was interesting about that too is the survey they were taking was just about kind of COVID experiences in general, and this question was part of it. And so I wonder a little bit too about who would we get to do the survey if the survey was explicitly named to be only about AAR? Are there folks that are going to say, well, I don't really know much about that, so I'm not even going to fill it out? So we captured some of the sort of awareness in this general sense, but not aware of the actual long-term impacts by folks who just said, well, I've seen that, I've seen the YouTube comments, right? Like I've seen it around, but I don't know that it really affects me. So we're capturing some of the other being the non sort of diverse university campus, but I think there'd be so much value in doing this again and reaching out again and actively doing, across Canada, right? I joke about sort of everybody surveys their own students, but truly getting what would that look like nationally as an international sample, the international student groups versus in terms of what does diversity look like on campus versus first generation, second generation immigrant, et cetera. There's a whole different system in there that I think would be incredibly important to get into. And that's where, we know at all of our meetings, the sort of the nuance of the interview data, really diving into that, what do you look like? And then who are you? And the sort of Asianness as well, the whole discussion of like, well, I'm Vietnamese or I am Filipino, but I've been perceived as, that was really important, and that's not coming out in the quant, right? So I think the mixed methods aspect of this is forever important, but then how do we get everybody to kind of give us that sense? And is it just students? Do we want to be reaching out to other groups on campus? So I feel like we just got to keep working together and we'll be able to kind of get around to it. But the idea is what you said too of education, starting from K to 12, I come from Edmonton, Alberta, and so we learned about the Chinese head tax because, of course, we are a railway community in Edmonton. So we learned about this very specific slice, right? But we were not getting the West Coast history. So even just sort of what you learn as somebody who's open to learning is baked into that curriculum. So I completely agree that having not only script training for people in the moment, but also kind of getting the next generation to see these things have been here. What are we going to do about it now? There's a long-term action aspect other than just sort of the acute action as well. So I would love to hear from the audience too, from no more wittering from me.
No, that was wonderful. I just jump in again. So yeah, like that was excellent. And like what Kitty just did this morning, he went on to radio, CBC radio, to talk about this project in anti-Asian racism. So working with the media is extremely important. And they just make a story, shareable, just getting out there to talk about this. So as researchers, we have roles to play, and also we can keep amplifying these voices. Also another thing, so storytelling is so important. Creating the space where storytelling can happen and people's stories can be amplified in some ways from the higher education institutions like schools of social work. Another thing I wanted to say was that the data we have is based on what people who came volunteered to participate. We do have non-gender diverse folks participating in it as well, but that's not a big segment of the data. So what I am trying to say is that the intersectionality exists within the Asian communities as well. So and that sort of trans Asian folks or gender non-conforming gender the Asian folks, and there are many nuances, and they might get particular forms of intersectional forms of racism, anti-Asian racism, from within and from outside the communities too. So I just wanted to put it out there that we do not have captured, we don't have that captured in our data, but that's too should be discussed further. Thank you. So going back to you, Katie.
Oh, thank you so much, Yahan, Izumi, and Madeleine. Wonderful answers. I learned so much from you. Every time I talk to you, you all, like, it was fascinating. Thank you so much. Let's see if anyone else have any other questions. Anyone in the audience who would like to have a question?
There's a question in the chat there,
Oh,
Kitty.
let me see.
We want to share a link to the research in our newsletter. Could you please provide that?
This is a link to the research in our newsletter. Do we have any we don't have any flyers yet, right? We don't have any we're still writing up the manuscript. So maybe when we start to work on the knowledge mobilization, we'll be able to share with folks here. Sorry about that, folks.
Yeah, but
Oh,
also sorry, anti-Asian racism. So this was a two-part series presentation done with Lunch and Learn series of School of Social Work, University of Regina. The first one that we just did, Kelly, me, and Patricia Zhang. Patricia, yeah. And so like what we did together is something else. So we have that report from that one, focusing on what we call UNAI, the helplessness or hopelessness that people feel, Chinese Canadians, Chinese immigrants feel when they are faced with anti-Asian racism. So we are happy to share the link to that. Katie, if you could do that, or I can do it.
Let me see. I might need to take some time to find the link. Also, I want to mention that both events are recorded and they're also public. So if you want to, cite the link, you can also welcome to do that. And if you need more information, you can also email through our Social Research Center email. So we'll be able to provide some other information as well. Oh, nice. Thank you so much, Izumi. Any other questions from folks? Well, I do have second question, but I don't want to dominate this discussion. Oh, Susie, you want to ask any questions? So Susie suddenly popped out.
I was actually just trying to see if my webcam would work.
Oh.
I didn't have a question, but I had a thought when you were introducing the topic around model minority. That an additional, I think, outcome of it is that the standard that we are compared to is different. And if we are not able to meet the expected standard of excellence, let's say in mathematics or diligence or whatever it may be, that that can have an impact. And additionally, if there's other compounding factors like, let's say, immigration or cultural values, that can have an impact on a person's sense of self. And because my focus is it's actually on queer mental health, but in terms of mental health, that can have an impact on how a person sees themselves, their successes, their Asianness, and all of those factors. So I just thought I wanted to add that model minorities can have pretty detrimental impacts.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you for sharing. Yes, I saw we share some links in the chat. Yes. So if you need anything else, Rhonda, please feel free to email to the email here. I think Rhonda is from Multicultural Association Saskatchewan, right?
Yes, I'm from Multicultural Council of Saskatchewan, and I did hear this on the radio this morning, and so that's
Oh,
why
thank you.
that's how I found out about it, and like went and grabbed my phone right away, and I'm like, okay, I need to find out about this. And so I'm really excited, and I will email you because I think that it would be good to make a connection about the research, but also in general. So looking forward to that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rhonda. It's nice to have you here. Thank you. Any other questions from folks? Oh, my second question would be very simple, very general. Like how would we Rebecca, oh, go ahead, Rebecca. I will give you a chance. I will give you more time. Please go ahead.
No worries. Thank you so much. So this is my second panel with you guys. This has been very informative. But I wanted to know, what do you guys think about in regards to whether it's students or whatever it may be, what steps can like communities, organizations, and individuals take to strengthen collaboration between racialized groups while addressing racism and division? And Professor Sakamoto had stated, a lot of times that, well, in regards to the Black Lives Matter movement, the Asian community found a way of addressing anti-Asian stigma and racism that was going on. But in regards to a lot of these communities, there is sometimes more division than collaboration. So what would you guys recommend in regards to taking steps to kind of strengthen collaboration between racialized groups?
Oh, thank you, Rebecca. Yahan, you would like to go first, or Izumi? Maddie, go ahead.
I could go first. So actually, Ketty and I, we were both part of the the organization, the Chinese Canadian National Council Toronto chapter. So we had a lot of solidarity activities and events among like racialized people, like Chinese with Tamil people, Chinese with Black people. So like we had a lot of activities to talk about the same or similar struggle we have. For example, the injured worker coalition. We actually sit down and talk together about what is happening in our work environment, why mental health is not recognized as a injury from work, and all of that come together, forming like a very unique type of solidarity that we actually go to the employers to ask for more. We actually act on our solidarity. So I think maybe to bring people together to just sit down and talk will be helpful. Yeah.
That's excellent, Yahan. I'm gonna just add, so precisely like what you're doing, Rebecca, is showing up to places and learning about different forms of oppression, different forms of racism. So that really informs, that would be the basis of solidarity building. So it's the same thing goes to all of us showing up and making connections. I think relationship building is the basis of solidarity building. So you can't just do it in the abstract, but you need to make connections, create relationships. And in that even micro way, like small way, getting to know somebody else who's so different from you, like making the goal for yourself, like each month you make friends with somebody whose backgrounds are so different from you. That act of trying, expansion, like trying to expand your own circle of friendship or comfort zone could challenge you and unlearning. So also threshold events I mentioned earlier, George Floyd murder, Black Lives Matter just took off. That existed before, but took off as a global movement afterwards. In Atlanta mass shooting, and the fine discovery of unmarked graves in Kamloops that were followed by many other sites of indigenous residential schools. So those are shocking, and sort of also, there's a little bit of shame, like, oh, I didn't even realize how horrible these things are. Like anti-Black racism, I registered that it already always existed, but I didn't realize how easily Black men who suspected to be criminal can be killed at the hands of police. So just take those things to heart and imagine what it's like. Then if you have a Black child, the Black teen sending off every day to school, that could be a scary moment, scary every day. Like, so just imagine what it's like. So making friends with people in different communities and stretching your imagination, I think, is also a basis of solidarity, and showing up in whatever ways you can, when you can. You can't do everything all the time, but yeah, those are the comments I have. Susie, I have a question, and I don't know if Maddie wanted to say something.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, Susie, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add just a reflection from my observations of queer community members. So you mentioned, the conflict within community members and communities of similar identities. Just a reflection or maybe something to consider is I imagine that when individuals or groups are systematically excluded or oppressed, it can be a natural response to replicate those systems and create safe bubbles of safety, and which also includes exclusion, which can be detrimental to the greater community and cohesion of community members. So even raising awareness and maybe depersonalizing some of those divisions and bringing them external to maybe some of the systemic forces that are impacting those divisions could be a way to bridge communities together. Sorry, Maddie.
No, thank you so much for that comment. That gave me so much more to chew on and to think about as well. What I was thinking about in terms of Rebecca's question and thinking too, I mean, I can only speak on behalf of myself as a white settler and thinking about what is allyship and what does solidarity look like. And there's a lot of discussions around what is allyship, what is the bystander training, how does that play into it? And what I've really taken away from the unlearning and the process of that and the continual, obviously lifelong process of that is that you can't just call yourself an ally. Right? Like, I'd love to just be an ally, but it's an action word. It's through the doing. And so the allyship I was sort of seeing even within our interviews, or the attempted or the desired allyship and the desired action, some of which happened and some of which didn't happen, felt like a really important finding of this for that idea of solidarity and practice, in that white people are whiny and they get worried about saying the wrong thing, and there's that kind of general sense of like, I think, well, we're going to say the wrong thing, and so but saying the wrong thing, maybe using the wrong term, but still putting your body in between somebody who is doing something inappropriate to a stranger, is still an incredible act of solidarity and allyship. So that kind of, I really, really think that what's coming out of this research for me is some of the idea of some of that bystander training and some of those phrases to be used could be such a powerful tool in a toolkit for somebody who's sort of trying their best or starting their journey of their own awareness. So I find this type of session and this collaboration, this learning, like Izumi and I have found so much in common. Not only that we have the same haircut and really like punk music, but we do have so I know every meeting we're like, oh, we're blending again. But just finding that even within different departments, we're talking about a lot of the same topics, but I've never worked with folks in social work before. And it's been it's opening my eyes to the academic siloing and divisions that can happen, that I think can kind of stop some of these conversations too. So I'm just so excited about this project and moving forward with others to think about ongoing. It's got to be ongoing. It's never going to be just one article.
Thank you so much, Madeleine. Anyone else? Any final question before we conclude? I'm also considering the time. Any other questions? Final call. On count of 3. 3, 2, 1, 0.5. Last chance. Okay, 0. Always fun. So thank you so much for coming today, everybody. It's really nice to see everyone here. And thank you so much, Yahan, Izumi, Madeleine, for this wonderful project. And I also it's my honor to be part of this project as well. I'm pretty sure we'll continue this journey and then bring more research about anti-Asian racism to our audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and please consider coming back and presenting as your work continues with us again. We'd love to have you back next year.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you so
care,
much, Catherine.
everyone.
Thank you, Susie, Suzanne.